Iziko South African Museums celebrates 200 years in operation this year, and in marking this huge milestone, its bicentenary celebrations includes the introduction and amplification of various initiatives. The celebrations began on the 13th of March and include a program of exhibitions, events and activities designed to showcase its extensive collections and contributions to research and heritage preservation. Now, to speak more on some of these initiatives, we're joined virtually by Dr. Bongani Ndhlovu, the acting CEO of Iziko Museums of South Africa. Dr. Ndhlovu, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning and thank you for having us.
I mean, this is by all means a huge milestone. Let's talk about the business of Iziko South African Museum in the last 200 years and its economic and cultural impact in South Africa. I mean, what does this milestone mean, for the institution and South Africa's heritage?
In terms of the activities, we are very, very much impressed by what the museum, as a conventional museum, has been able to achieve in the preservation and promotion of our natural, artistic, and also cultural heritage.
Yeah.
In the past 200 years, the museum has been able to collect some of the most treasured specimen, objects, and artworks in our history. And then these relate in terms of cultural expression. If you look at the Lombos Oak, for example, which is one of the pieces that we have in our museums, it does give a detailed articulation of what we as human beings in the southern tip of Africa have been able to achieve culturally and artistically. And again, if you look also at another object like the Lydenburg Heights, they are an expression of how we as human beings have interacted and tried to interpret our own world. And within that particular context, how we've also expressed ourselves culturally. There are a number of also specimens and objects that we have, including the buffalo, the oldest buffalo horn structure in our collection, which also indicates to us how we've also engaged with nature, and also in that process of engagement, how we've also contributed to the extension of some of the wildlife. So what we therefore use our objects to remind ourselves as the human species that we too are part of this environment and that we need also to preserve it. But most importantly, it also reminds ourselves of the role that we can play in its preservation. We also have artworks that also relate and interpret this history. Some of this history is the history of our difficult past, about colonialism, about human wrongs, and we do use our objects to narrate this in order for us as human beings and not to repeat those human wrongs. As you can sort of see now on display is an exhibition entitled Humanities. This exhibition also more in detail explains to us as a human species how we are of the same species, and also how we can improve our engagement, our interactions, and also make this world a better world. In terms of economic contribution, as a museum, as a group of museums, we attract approximately 500,000 visitors per year to our sites and galleries. This therefore means that some people travel far from South Africa to engage and appreciate this heritage, and as a result also spend some of their hard-earned dollars and rents in and around establishments and hospitals.
Dr. Ndhlovu, it's quite interesting that you touched on colonialism, or how the museum addresses colonialism in its mandate, because there's growing calls the world over, about decolonization and more inclusive narratives. So how is the museum addressing these?
We have embarked on a project to overhaul our site. We are currently reimagining our exhibition spaces and galleries and putting up new exhibitions and content that uses our objects to narrate this difficult past about colonialism and the difficult era of apartheid. If you look also at the current exhibition at the Iziko South African National Gallery that we are currently showing, it also relates and narrates that past. So in reimagining Iziko, we are redoing and undoing our colonial past, reinterpreting it, and also recentering it, giving it African perspectives. We recognize that in the past, the museum has, in some instances, in many instances, dehumanized in its approach African peoples and indigenous people, the Khoi and the San in particular. And we are undoing those narratives and then putting up new narratives. As we've indicated, on the 13th of March, we launched the ISM 200 project, and we appeal to South Africans. In the nutshell, we need approximately 330 million to put up and completely overhaul our galleries. But we've taken it upon ourselves that one gallery at a time, we are going to undo those.
And in undoing some of the narratives, how is the museum working to ensure that some of the underrepresented communities actually see their history reflected in its reflections, I mean in its exhibitions?
We are working with, we are using a concept of co-curating, working with communities, also working supported by also a group of interested parties that we call advisory task team for each exhibition that we are doing. The one exhibition that there are two exhibitions we've done in the past, launched in the past few weeks. The Sea and Us, we've worked with communities there. Yeah. The humanities exhibition that we flighted, we did that. So we are using the concept of co-curating to see to it that communities' voices are also expressed and articulated in those exhibitions. We are also working on a series of other exhibitions supported by a number of indigenous knowledge holders and source communities to redo and also tell those new narratives from the perspective of those communities.
Right. Let's talk about Human Rights Month and Freedom Month and see through Iziko's current exhibitions such as Who Were the Enslaved, commemorating the lives under enslavement at the Cape of Good Hope, and as well as Humanity, reimagining the story of human evolution, and the Tata Madiba virtual exhibition. Talk us through those.
Yes, starting with Tata Madiba, the visual exhibition, we also have a physical form of it. In this exhibition, uses the lenses of Tata Madiba to tell us, narrate an integrated history of the natural sciences, okay, of the arts, and also of the cultural history. More often, when we engage with the narrative of Tata Madiba, we focus more on the political side of it. As a museum, we've taken an approach wherein we also emphasize the other elements that are linked. There are a number of species that are named after Tata Madiba, and we are using those lenses. We encourage visitors to engage with that virtual exhibition and also to come to our site at the Iziko South African Museum. Who were the enslaved? We are using broadly our collections and also our research findings to tell the narratives of those who were enslaved. In the past, with museums and other researchers tended to focus on numbers. In the exhibitions, who were the enslaved? We are giving names and rehumanizing those persons who were given and whose narratives were shown as numbers. We've given them, our team have been able to research and find their names, and we are using these narratives and their names to tell these stories. We are rehumanizing them. We are saying these were human beings, were not numbers. Okay,
let's move on to the issues and progress of the sacred ancestral human remains, and as well as the sacred sites and the later status of stakeholder engagement around these.
Yes, in the past few years, we've been engaging with communities, affected communities, to therefore address the question of human remains in our collections. First and foremost, as a museum, we are saying human remains were not supposed, unethically collected human remains were not supposed at all to be in our collections. 30 years post-1994, it is unjustifiable for a museum to have human remains in its collection. But we've taken an approach where we work with communities, we are guided with communities as to how we are going to rebury our ancestral human remains in a dignified way. We've been engaging with communities and affected communities to give us direction, and then we are planning that this year, in September, working with them, we are going to see to it that a number of those human remains in our unethical collected human remains in our collections are reburied. Furthermore, we are also working with communities in Namibia and outside of the country to see to it that those remains are repatriated to their rightful owners and communities.
All right, Dr. Ndhlovu, lovely chatting to you. I mean, 200 years is a massive, massive milestone. Thank you so much for sharing the museum's plans in terms of celebrating this huge milestone with us. We just spoke to Dr. Bongani Ndhlovu, the acting CEO of Iziko Museums of South Africa, on the museum celebrating 200 years of operations this year.